all get into arguments, right? But what if the real reason we fight isn't what we think it is? Today, we're diving into a hidden source of conflict that might just change how you see your next disagreement, and maybe even how you see yourself. Let's get into it. It's a huge question, and you see it everywhere. From tiny arguments with family to these massive divisions in society, it just feels like conflict is part of the deal of being human. But why? Why is it so constant? And you know what? We usually think we have the answer. It's their fault, they did something wrong, they believe the wrong thing, they're just annoying. It's the easy answer, right? But those are just the surface-level stories we tell ourselves, and they're almost always covering up something much, much deeper. So what if the real source of all that friction isn't out there at all? What if it actually starts inside of us, as a kind of hidden imbalance, just waiting for a trigger? That's the big idea we're going to unpack. Okay, to really get how this works, let's start with a super simple everyday example. It's a perfect way to see how the reasons we think we're upset often have nothing to do with what's actually going on. So, picture this. You've got a neighbor, and they just drive you crazy. The reason you give yourself, the stated reason, is that they're inconsiderate. Their music's too loud. Whatever. Seems logical enough. But what if the real reason is actually a hidden resentment you're carrying around? In that case, your neighbor's behavior isn't the cause of the conflict. It's just the spark that lit a fuse that was already there. And that brings us to this key idea: inner imbalance. This is what happens when these deeply buried feelings, things like resentment or envy or just plain intolerance, start to mess with our internal world. And when things are out of whack inside, that disruption projects outward, creating the fights and arguments we see in our lives. All right, so if that's true for a little fight with a neighbor, how does this idea scale up? Let's take this concept of inner imbalance and apply it to something way bigger, something a lot of us are feeling right now, this widespread sense of distrust. Distrust seems like it's in the air these days, doesn't it? It fuels so much tension and social conflict. And just like with that annoying neighbor, people who feel a lot of distrust, well, they usually feel like they have some really good, solid reasons for it. But is a bad experience from the past really the whole story? Well, when we start to dig into the roots of that distrust, we find some really interesting imbalances. On one side, you've got an inability to forgive something that happened in the past, which can totally shut a person off from seeing the truth. And on the other, there's this thing the source material calls intransigence, which is basically a stubborn mix of intolerance and just plain laziness to even try to see another point of view. And that's often fueled by even deeper stuff like shame or vanity or envy. Now, these qualities, this intolerance, this refusal to listen, the anger that just seems to bubble up, this is not a new problem. Actually, these traits sound an awful lot like a framework for understanding human flaws that's been around for thousands of years. I mean, just think about what comes along with that deep-seated distrust. There's wrath, right? That intense anger. There's resentment. There's pride, that feeling of being better than the other side. And yeah, even sloth, a kind of mental laziness, an unwillingness to do the hard work of thinking things through. Are these starting to ring a bell? And here's the big connection. These modern-day psychological imbalances, they line up almost perfectly with what religious traditions have been calling the deadly sins for centuries. It kind of suggests that we're all still wrestling with the same fundamental parts of human nature that people have been trying to name for a very, very long time. But here's where this whole idea gets really challenging, maybe even a little uncomfortable. We tend to think these kinds of imbalances only belong to bad people. But what if they can also hide behind actions that we all consider to be good? The source material throws this challenge right at us. It says that a lot of us just assume that if someone is living a life of doing good, they must be free from any inner imbalance. But is that really true? Can our best intentions actually end up creating more problems? Let's look at what can happen when doing good turns into just indulging someone. The effects can be pretty toxic. The person receiving the help can start to feel entitled, or even envious and dissatisfied. And the do-gooder, they can get a hit of pride, of arrogance, looking down on the very people they say they're helping. The really wild part is that this single good action creates an imbalance on both sides of the equation. And get this, here's another surprising example: our love for our pets. The argument here is that true love is about helping something fulfill its own true nature. But what do we so often do? We try to make our pets more human. And that might not be love at all. This kind of false love actually smothers the animal's true nature. It's a subtle kind of arrogance, really.
like we're trying to improve upon nature. And the result? Well, the source suggests that this imbalance in the owner can actually create an imbalance in the pet, leading to some really bizarre things, like our pets developing human-like neuroses. What a wild thought.
So we've seen how these imbalances can pop up in our arguments and even in our best intentions. But maybe the most important thing to get is that they live inside us, whether we ever act on them or not. And this is absolutely the crucial point. You can be carrying around an imbalance like envy or resentment even when there's no outlet for it. It just becomes a part of your personality, quietly shaping how you see the world, just waiting for the right situation, the right person, the right trigger to make it erupt. It's always there, just under the surface. So if these hidden imbalances are the real root of the problem, what in the world can any of us do about it? Well, the answer means we have to stop looking outward at everyone else and finally start looking inward. The way forward isn't about pointing fingers or calling out the imbalances you see in other people. That's just going to create more conflict, right? The real work, the hard work, is turning that spotlight back on ourselves. It's about taking that ancient advice seriously. Know thyself. So what does that path actually look like? Well, it starts with some honest reflection, asking yourself, why did I really think that? What's really motivating me? Then it's about building the habit of just pausing, examining those thoughts before you act on them. And finally, it's the slow, steady work of trying to uproot those imbalances from your own inner world. And that leaves all of us with a final and pretty personal question. The next time you feel a really strong emotion, anger, frustration, even that little head of pride from doing a good deed, just for a second, pause and ask yourself, what is the true motivation behind this thought? The answer to that question might just be your first step toward finding real balance, both inside and out.